Season 5 of The Loud House brought us changes to the status quo, aging up our cast and taking them through their share of tribulations. It was an introduction of Rubener's new direction for the show, and change is never easy. How would a Season 6 follow up on that direction? This season would be more about settling in and refining that formula. Some of the stakes are higher, some of the elements more grandiose, some rough edges stand it out. But as a whole, it feels more like the calm after the storm. This would be a time for grabbing ice cream, having a hoedown or two, and taking a nice vacation. It was actually the first season I got to see as it was initially airing, being a latecomer to the show. So let's see where it takes us. Season 6 would take a lot out of Season 5's playbook, but in a slightly more scaled-back sense. Some would even look at it as a course correction. One notable aspect of this is the clear reduction in school plots. Lincoln still gets a decent amount, but it's not a focus like it was previously. This makes sense. We got a lot of that establishment and development of the setting done already. We don't need to push it as hard. We're now focusing on the present rather than riding the winds of change. The more relaxed atmosphere also led to an uptick in the more low-key house-centric stories, such as The Loud Cloud, which sees the replacement of the quirky sticky note system with the digitized version, or Sofa So Good, a sibling group plot about trying to recover the living room sofa when the garbage service accidentally takes it. Both of these wouldn't feel at all out of place in Season 2. Paradoxically, though, this season also has a tendency to take its plots all over Royal Woods, even if just for a short montage. Well, we got these locations fleshed out, might as well use them. Now, for something that's not so low-key, well, there's a good reason why Lisa's the thumbnail choice this time around. This season is well known for just how much the writers love to use her. She is all over this thing, to the point where a lot of fans see them as using her as a crutch. She and her inventions play a notable role in practically every other episode, from starting off an episode's plot when often unrelated, to adding random tension or antics to an existing plotline, to simply moving the plot along or acting as the final solution to a conflict. Scanning a package for pranks leads to the fear that Lori is failing out of college, or a mail delivery system results in Lana's dilemma about a sleepover. If an episode uses a small part of the main cast as the focus, she'll very often find herself in that group. Then there's the further escalation of her scientific abilities, from building rockets for the Norwegian government to knocking satellites out of the air. It's quite a lot of power creep for a 5-year-old, and where you see a lot of those later season complaints come from. This whole situation feels similar to what we've seen with Professor Frink in The Simpsons. As the plots got zanier, he became much more useful for the writers. Building on that, I guess you can say that Space Jam is basically our Deep Space Homer. Lisa's truly reached that level. And with lots of Lisa comes lots of robots as well. We all know how much the Rubener era loves robots. The robots all get some screen time this season. We even see this crossover into the Casagrandes as Breakfast Bot. Todd has cemented himself as Lisa's go-to sidekick on her adventures, and is shown to be both very playful and a capable voice of reason when Lisa's acting irrational. He's even considered to be part of the family now, which is honestly very sweet. He can even drive Vanzilla and serves as one of Lenny's driving instructors. He's not the best at it, but it's the thought that counts. Lisa's near omnipresence this season meant that she was a natural choice to lead the charge in one of the season's specials. Time Trap focuses on a situation where the siblings once again break their parents' accident-prone wedding vase, and fearing potential punishment, Lisa builds a time machine out of Vanzilla a la Back to the Future, intending to swap the vase in the past for another gift. The rest of the siblings stow away, the timeline gets screwed, and they have to clean up the mess. I love how the special addresses the butterfly effect that Lisa's solution could cause, and how it gives us an oddly intellectual moment from Lynn. Funny stuff. But as someone who loves alternate history, I wasn't a huge fan of how they executed the alternate timeline. Like, some aspects were more believable, but most were simply opposites for shock value rather than anything that made sense. I could go on about this, but that'd be better saved for its own video at some point. What's most important is that both of our specials this season are unified by cool concepts that couldn't reach their high potential. Save Royal Woods marks our other example. An Undersecretary of Water Leisure named Joyce Crandall wants to flood Royal Woods to make room for a 6th Great Lake and secure a promotion, and the town is understandably horrified. Lincoln helps lead the townsfolk through several plans in an attempt to dissuade her and prove that their town is special enough to be saved. Overall, it's a very intriguing idea. We get some awesome moments from Lincoln and a rare storyline where the entire town gets involved, with loads of supporting characters getting fun moments. But something about this special feels like it should have been a sequel to the movie, continuing his ideas and showing that Lincoln can play a Duke-esque role for the whole of Royal Woods. Maybe even have Angus come back and have the characters uncover Royal Woods' history with the loud Scottish royalty. The Netflix contract would have prevented something like this, so I can't fault them too much, but it would have been way better than a mediocre Hamilton parody where the characters lie about King George III having stayed there. Fat George never left Europe at any point during his reign. And when this fails, they end up realizing that Joyce did this behind her boss's back and expose her on the news, which was funny but pretty anticlimactic. Same goes for Joyce herself as a villain. She presents the highest stakes the characters have faced since the movie, but unlike Morag, who was dangerous enough to match those stakes, Joyce was too over-the-top goofy to be a serious villain, yet the stakes were still too high to make her a joke. She might have that guest star appeal to some, being voiced by Christine Baranski, but most of her notable roles come from shows that most kids wouldn't really care about. Seasons 2 through 4 slowly built up the Casagrandes spin-off, from a poorly disguised pilot to several preemptive episodes. This season, however, is feeling the ripple effects from that show's cancellation. Multiple episodes feel like Casagrandes leftovers, possibly being scripts that were intended for a season 4 that never happened. It's pretty evident in the way that they were written. Great Lakes Freakout, our Halloween special, is centered around a scary storefront competition that the Casagrande Mercado is participating in. And while the louds that do show up are used pretty well, the second act has it switched to what is primarily a Bobby, Hector, and Carl plot about zombies. Real ones, this time. Meanwhile, Fashion No Show centers around Carlota calling for Lenny's help and preparing for a big showcase. While Lenny's presence does motivate the plot, and Loud House characters have been guest stars in several Casagrandes episodes, the story is still told from Carlota's perspective, with Carl and Sergio playing the primary supporting roles. And then there's Forks and Knives Out, which could have easily been a Casagrandes episode if the opening scene had a perspective change, or Day of the Dad, which focuses on Lori, but centers around her relationships with Bobby and Arturo, and takes place almost entirely in Great Lakes City. Something to note is that all of these episodes are in the back half of the season, which would have been squarely within the time frame of a Season 4's production. Staff from the Casagrandes even worked on these specific episodes, though this is also the case for later episodes that use the characters, so this is probably just a red herring. A small but notable upgrade would be in the art department, specifically in regards to our title cards. They've always gone for the look of a Sunday comic strip, but they typically detail just the top panel, with the bottom three taking on solid backgrounds of the three primary colors. Very basic, but it gets the job done. But in the Rubiner era, they started to receive similar detailing to the top panel, with more intricate art that foreshadows elements of the episode. The primary color palette would be kept, even when some would bend the hues. Something about the placement of the hula dolphin is just so funny, and I'm all for it. Another fun little tidbit is that Snow Escape and Snow Newsday get custom art for their credit sequence, depicting a beautiful winter landscape. An extremely rare treat that I forgot about when writing the Season 2 retrospective. Oops. But in turn, the art department would take an unfortunate step back. Remember all of that nice promotional art the show used to do? They made a lot of fun stuff for their social media posts. There was an abundance of clever preview art for both entire seasons and individual episodes. But this has taken a sharp decline, and is practically gone in Season 6. I get that the hype around the show that was present at the time is basically non-existent nowadays, but it's sad to see that fun enthusiasm go. This was around the time where we'd see a withdrawal in other elements of the franchise as well, such as merchandise, all but gone outside of the Paper Cuts comics. I think a lot of it has to do with the shrinking size of the fandom. We have the casual fans like kids who just watch the show when it's on, the diehards that follow the show religiously, but it's those middle fans that make the merchandise profitable, that make it worth it to go the extra mile for these fun promotions, and they're all but gone at this point. So, the Rubiner era has been hit or miss with fans, but despite entering the core of it, a few Savino sprinkles snuck in, which is honestly surprising. The Mortician's Club uses an ARG vacuum cleaner in Haunted House Call, and in Save Royal Woods, Lincoln talks about the first time he read comics in his underwear, an element that's otherwise been exclusive to Season 1. They even managed to sneak a couple of parental bonuses in. I was quite shocked myself when Cheryl admitted to wearing bra pads. So with all of that in mind, how have our characters been settling in? Lincoln's been taking it easy after a very eventful Season 5, while keeping up with his leadership roles, from his siblings to the dog squad to even the entire town. He's got strategies and ideas, and people will listen. There were a couple of bumps in the road, but he's become well adjusted to middle school. He even lampshades the series' adherence to comic book time, mentioning that it feels like he's been 11 forever. Going along with this statement, we finally get to see him celebrate his 12th birthday with his family and friends. It's not stated exactly when this is, but a year prior, Nickelodeon declared June 5th to be National Lincoln Loud Day, and this episode aired in the US just a few days before that date. So that's what fans usually consider it to be. So, the prevalence of more scaled-back stories meant that we'd see him spending more time with his siblings, and quite appropriate for this season, Lisa was a notable example, the two co-starring in multiple episodes. And with access to Lisa's technology, he might as well give it some use. Alongside the duo's development of the Loud Cloud, Lisa would continue to provide her technology for her brother's David Steele exploits. This is when Lincoln and Clyde would tackle their first David Steele fan film, and Lisa's tech would serve to boost it to near professional quality, even including a real nuclear reactor. Todd got to serve the role of Chip Micro, the movie's villain, and even served to assist the duo with editing and production. The rise of David Steele was more prevalent as a whole. Ace Savvy was mostly just a Clink and McCloud thing, but now we get to have the whole dog squad involved. We even see Rusty spend months planning a surprise spy scenario for Lincoln as a birthday present. Their friendship has really come a long way. David Steele even runs in the family. Issue number 1 has been passed down from son to son since his great-grandfather. While we wouldn't see this built upon much further, it was sweet to see 3 generations of Louds united in a common passion. Clyde would have a successful season of his own, palling around with his buddies and maintaining much of his maturity and cool-headedness. His focus episodes this time are very interesting, mostly being told from the perspective of his friends and exhibiting detrimental behavior towards him for non-malicious reasons. One of these shows that his dodgeball skills skyrocket when he is enraged, while the other has him presented with the opportunity to enter an elite cooking program abroad. Something that stood out to me about the latter was Clyde's final decision to back out of the program. He loves cooking and baking, but as a hobby, and might not want to center his life around it and keeps his options open. It sends a positive message, and hey, who's to say he won't still become principal one day? Catastrophe was another standout based around his family as a whole, highlighting their quirky love of cats and throwing them into a chaotic situation when they forget about Nana Gale's birthday party. A fun change of pace from their typically rather milquetoast stories. I also have to commend the twist ending for the orchid grief, and how Howard was shockingly happy about the rare orchid's death. Anyone who's taken care of an orchid can tell you how difficult they are to maintain. Lori, Morning Glory. How's college coming along? Much better, it seems. Fairway's depiction this season is much more grounded, and Lori's been doing great in her classes. The rest of the siblings can't read golf scores, so they try and intervene when they think she's failing out. One of those siblings, because it's season 6, also makes a flag-seeking golf ball that Lori unknowingly uses and falsifies a perfect round on the campus course, which she has to come clean about and nearly tanking her reputation on campus. Really, Lisa? Nonetheless, it was a good season for Lori, and her plot lines are much stronger. This has been helped by the writers granting her some flexibility with her location, letting her get involved in more storylines. They can have her pal around with the siblings in Royal Woods for a day or two, or ever kick it over to Great Lakes City to focus on her relationship with Bobby. A good, under-par season for her. Remember how those golf scores work. Leni's season was a mixed bag in so many ways. On one hand, she continues her reputation as one of the most developed Louds. She finally earns her driver's license, and scores a new boyfriend. Gavin is the newest in the revolving door of Leni boyfriends and crushes that she's become pretty infamous for. Her skills as a babysitter have also grown substantially since just 1 season ago. She shows great intuition when Lisa is stuck in space in her rocket, deducing that she hasn't had her nap and the snack she packed for her, explaining Lisa's repeated mistakes that got her hurtling toward the sun. She even gets to punch in the warp speed code to get her home. It was a very clever use of an over-the-top premise to teach a grounded story about self-care. But when she isn't in focus, she gets her fair share of normal moments, but her ditzier side has seen a notable resurgence. It clashes with that character development she's had over the past several seasons. The writers often don't know what to have her do during these big group episodes, so I guess they're thinking, oh, we need a quick gag for Leni. Let's just have her do something stupid. Regardless, it wasn't enough to sour an otherwise great season for her. This is definitely not a particularly strong Luna year. She's in all the big group episodes, but she only gets one story focused on her. The Moongoats have to nail a performance for the chance to record a song demo, but Luna develops a bad case of hiccups, which lasts well into the next day. The siblings try and cure it in various ways, and a certain someone develops a throat spray for temporary relief, but the bottle ends up lost and Luna has to adapt to the condition. Low-key one of her less memorable episodes, but it did have some fun moments between her and Chunk, and her turning her hiccups into a musical asset was sweet. It reminded me of how Scatman John did the same thing with his stutter and made it key to his success. Good job, Luna! Luan bounced back after a bumpy and less prominent Season 5. Her cooking skills return, she gets some cute and meaningful moments with Benny, and 2 excellent focus episodes under her belt. One has Mr. Coconuts get wrecked in an accident, and having caused the accident, Lola steps up to fill in for him. They're such hits that Mr. Coconuts feels replaced, and Luan's guilt leads her to commit acts of self-sabotage, and a certain someone helps her compromise the situation, because it's Season 6. It just goes to show how much Luan views Mr. Coconuts as both a living being and an extension of herself. Meanwhile, the other episode has Luan score a performance role at Dairyland, the esteemed Heidi Heifer. Mrs. Bernardo wanted that role and goes in a comic bout of depression, leading to Luan and Benny having to hide it from her out of fear of disownment. While she's ultimately proud of her student and scores a small role for herself, this episode says just as much about her as it does Luan. She's apparently been rejected from the role many times, and as much as the show likes to joke about it, it's implied that her over-the-top attitude could be compensation for her low self-esteem, a product of her failed dreams of being a Broadway star. This is when the show would start to joke about her many one-woman shows and how low-brow some of her roles are when she actually manages to get them, which includes Cats, with a K for legal reasons. And I don't think she was bluffing. Still, people seem to love her dancing skills, so that's something to feel good about. Lynn was a mixed bag, as always. To go with the theme of power creep, having superhuman strength is just part of her character now. She even claims to have been powerlifting since she was 2, so now this is a consistent factor that later episodes have to account for. Snow Escape even has her going outright bloodhound and assaulting her family with snowballs. Don't worry, they do get the last laugh in the end. Then again, she does get her ass kicked by Ballhoffner's Bobcat. I guess she's kinda like Skips in that her strength can toggle off if the plot demands it. Despite all of this, and one particularly massive blunder, her personal focus this season has actually been very good. One story has her learning to respect the effort and skill of cheerleaders after writing them off as mere support athletes for her team. A humbling moment that cements friendships and even shows a little of her feminine side, which is extremely rare. Her other episode serves as an improved second attempt at her hall monitor shtick. She's still too much of a stickler, but nowhere near the same degree as Schooled. The episode even calls out her behavior, pairing her up with Liam again and teaching her that some situations require gentler and more intelligent approaches, not handing out demerits. A good lesson for her that makes the halls of Royalwood's middle school a better place. Once again, Lucy's season was centered around the Morticians Club and their antics, and now Bertrand is back, only exacerbating the group's lack of development. The rescue mission to get him back, though, was fun, taking the group to a setting they normally avoid and mixing in plenty of heart along with it. But there's still the major concern that's only going to get worse. If Lisa is the show's power creep in terms of technology, then Lucy is this but for magic. You see a fair share of outsiders tout Lucy as the best part of the show, while simultaneously mocking it for straying from its grounded roots, not realizing that Lucy is the #1 progenitor of this problem. The transitional era of the show opened the door, that's for sure, but Lucy knocked the wall down. Their first episode this season has them solve hauntings and help ghosts move on to the afterlife, while Lucy's spellbook gets significant use in Great Lakes Freakout. Here's her gifting Lynn one of those spells, and then comes the morbid gift of a beating heart for Haiku, and that's not even getting into what we see in future seasons, like Persephone's store-bought transmogrification potions, or Morpheus' ability to casually bend reality. It's all just too accessible to kids with no real repercussions. At least some of the gags with Buzz were funny. He is such a weasel. Now for some more down-to-earth antics. Lana had some strong focus. You Oughta Know Better was a nice break from her ongoing obsession with grossness and gave some spotlight to her automotive skills again, while teaching her that honest business and good quality service always trumps cheap shortcuts and gouging for money. Flip got a case of Mr. Krabs on this one. Meanwhile, Sleepstakes lets us see a previously unknown side of Lana, dealing with her fear of slumber parties and the lengths she's willing to go to cope with that fear. Lana was definitely a good pick for this. She's rarely away from her family and is the only Lana that doesn't have any recurring friends of her own, despite how well she gets along with others. She has slept away from home before without issue, but it's a rare instance where an inconsistency made for a better episode. Her twin had an active season as she always does. While her episodes were strong, most of them are starting to get a little formulaic, often falling into the trap of relearning lessons about being honest and genuine. She is 7, so not everything is going to stick on the first try, but you gotta keep things fresh. Love Stinks, despite the title, is exactly that. Here we see her grow an attachment to a skunk Lana was caring for when it was revealed she has finer tastes. She bonds with her, gives her a fancy name, and struggles to let her go when Lana informs her that she needs to go back to the wild. It was cool to see Lana playing the voice of reason here. The lessons from Animal House stuck, and now she is passing those lessons on. And in Lola's case, it was definitely the change of pace she needed, bringing her out of her comfort zone and showing how above and beyond she is willing to go for someone else. Lisa, you need no introduction this time, we're just gonna keep this brief. While we get small glimpses of her kid's side in the climax of Space Jammed, we get a full episode centered around it in the form of I Can't. And for Season 6, it's surprisingly low tech. Lisa's eyesight starts to get worse, and she has an irrational fear of the eye doctor. She escapes the appointment with Todd, who thinks that this is all ridiculous, and in her blurry-eyed delirium thinks she's run away and taken a train to Florida. She ultimately gets over her fear in the end and gets new glasses, but it was amusing to see this super competent genius in all sorts of ridiculous situations like a kid would do. They're giving her all this screen time, it's nice to see them at least trying some different things with her. Since this is Season 6, she was a catalyst of Lily's sole focus episode. She keeps getting upstage at show and tell, and brings Lisa's shrink ray. Of course, antics happen, and the whole class gets shrunken down, but it was a fun episode despite the minimal dialogue. The chase sequences with the guinea pig were entertaining, and it was a strong start to Lily's modern focus episodes. Great use of the premise and of Lily's growing intelligence and leadership. Just be sure not to jump in that box. Our Loud parents fared much in the same way Luna did. Plenty of screen time, but less dedicated focus. Rita didn't even get a focus episode of her own, but got to co-star with Lola in Crown and Dirty. Who knew she could tap dance? Lynn's main outing this time was one of our more low-key adventures. He fakes being sick to avoid a visit to Aunt Ruth's, and he gets into an over-the-top conflict trying to chase down a cricket. It was hilarious to see the pets spectating and enjoying every moment of it, but while Lynn's always been an emotional goofball, he's definitely been trending more towards childishness as time goes on. And this kind of plays into an issue that both of them have been going through, their fluctuating competence when it comes to handling their kids. They're shown to be afraid of their children, mostly Lynn Jr. this time around, and refuse to discipline her multiple accounts of property damage. They do get their competent and strict moments to balance it out, but this inconsistency is where a lot of the Mr. and Mrs. Turner accusations come from. But to end it on a good note, we do get to see their wedding. Nothing over the top, but a good bit of world building with some fun little moments from our supporting cast. Good stuff. Now, let's check in on that supporting cast, shall we? Our John DiMaggio duo had a good showing as always. Mr. Grouse took a slight step back, sticking mostly to quick cameos and gags, along with serving as a running gag in an episode or two. He does at least get a few small roles, such as serving as one of Lenny's driving instructors and being the victim of a ghost attack, but no major outings this time around. Lynn also mentioned his habit of chewing chicken bones at stoplights. His counterpart is rubbing off on him, and we get this great meta joke with the two of them pretending to be twins in the ice cream contest. As for old Flip, he took a notable downtick this season, only showing up in half of the episode count he got last time. But unlike his counterpart, he scored some lead roles. Flip This Flip acts as a sort of follow-up to a Flipmas Carol. Remember the girl that appeared in the flashback? She was his crush, the one that got away, and the Loud kids helped him clean up his image and go for a second chance all these years later. She, of course, turns out to be just as much of a slob as he is, but it shows how far he's willing to go if he cares, even if his character is difficult to suppress. This is also where we see the writers give Flip a sidekick, a raccoon named Nacho, who serves as someone within his business that he can bounce off of. Technically, he did make an appearance last season, and we get a sort of proto-Nacho in Room and Horde, but this is the season that made him a mainstay. He tends to get involved in most of Flip's operations, and in his downtime, FPS games are promptly getting floored by Todd. Despite the downtick in school plots, the Dog Squad shows no signs of slowing down. They're bringing more of their adventures outside of the school setting, and their news segments start to cover some external stories. In fact, they're building up relationships with the professional news. Catherine Mulligan forgives them after their abominable snowman turned out to be one of Liam's sheep, and donates equipment from her studio when she witnesses their drive as reporters. Sorry, Chandler. The group's members have continued to score spotlight episodes of their own. Stella gets to show off her skills with machines, participating in a state competition, and conquering her fear of public speaking after an embarrassing incident as a child. Meanwhile, Rusty has to run Duds for Dudes for a few hours, and goes on a chase to recover Mick Spiker's pants when he accidentally sells them. This is actually where the name Dog Squad comes from, being Rusty's self-proclaimed name for the group. The scenario really showcases Rusty's skills as a salesman, along with the relationship he has with his father. In fact, he too gets a surprising amount of action this season. Sure, his car gets fucked up, and a ghost ends up trashing his store, but hey, he gets to date Catherine Mulligan now, which I'd say is a win. Liam is still the writer's favorite, so much so that he gets to do a line in Zach's voice. His appearances are numerous as always, and with plenty of episodes taking us all over town, they were likely to kick it over to Honeycutt Farms. The squad also gets the honor of meeting Mick Swagger, twice. Up until this point, he's been a very Luna-centric character, so it's nice to see them branching out with him. Now to round up everyone else. Leonard's had more of a presence since his introduction. He attends Lincoln's 12th birthday party, and the kids take a brief trip to Mastodon to teach their gramps how to run it. A lot of focus for such a new face. But they certainly haven't forgotten about our original action grandpa. Look who just got engaged. Myrtle's even revealed to be a retired secret agent. These two were made for each other. It's pretty odd, though, that both granddads are missing from their kid's wedding. On the subject of love, Benny gets a consistent presence in Luan's episodes as her voice of reason, and even scores a focus episode of his own about running the Burpin' Burger. Very few supporting characters have had this honor. Ballhoffner's been a clear hit with the writers, being more frequently utilized outside of the school setting. His over-the-top personality makes it fun to throw him into different situations. You even get the semi-focus episode where he briefly joins the Doodads, and his relationship with Lincoln starts to improve. Scoot is still a prick, so is Chandler. Probably the closest we've had to a character undergoing downright Flanderization. His fixation on hating Lincoln has become more extreme, to the point of it feeling like he wants to kill him, and his bullying behavior towards other kids escalated alongside it. No sign of his deal-maker personality either, the last thing that gave him any depth. The biggest losers of this season have to be Melly and Darcy, mostly being relegated to use as little kid incidentals. And they don't really interact with their friends, which is super unusual in Darcy's case given how Lisa-heavy this season was. And as for our big winners of the roundup, they would be Cheryl and Meryl. This honestly shocked me when I was rewatching this season. Like I mentioned last season that Cheryl was the exception to the school switch, but I forgot just how much screen time they got. Our Southern Belle comic duo pops up very frequently outside of the school setting, joining our ensemble of quirky adults. And they get so much to do, from being award judges to cheerleading coaches, even scoring a semi-spotlight episode where they take on Lana and Lola in Auntie Pam's ice cream contest. We learn a lot about their dynamics and interests. They have a favorite TV show in Southern Hospitality, the season finale of which, quite amusingly, happens 3 separate times. Lola exploits this twice for her own benefit. But their ubiquity here is a good lesson in character flexibility. If a character is given some kind of gag or role outside of their niche, and you can naturally bring them into episodes and scenarios, then the shelf life of the character is extended dramatically. They took this to heart with Mr. Ballhoffner as well. His extreme tendencies and ability to teach multiple subjects meant that he could be utilized in more situations. In contrast with Mrs. Johnson, who got silent cameos at best outside of the classroom or stories tied to it. And with that, Season 6 comes to a close. Overall, a successful sophomore season for the Rubiner tenure. New lessons were learned while old lessons were not forgotten. It followed up on some of Season 5's over-the-top ideas, but mixed in those with the more laid-back sensibilities of Seasons 2 or 4, then topped it with some mechanized magic. It wanted to push the boundaries of where these characters could go. That's how we ended up in space, but it didn't want to forget where it came from. How good of a job it did was subjective. Did you think it was a course correction or a point of no return? Did the show need to keep taking these extremes to stay fresh, or did they simply need to stick to their guns after the showrunner changed? The next few seasons would follow this example, so the question was important. Let me know what you think of Season 6, and what your favorite moments were. I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot to talk about. In the meantime, pack your bags and fill up the gas tank. We've got a road trip ahead of us.